I saw the red light again, faint, but unmistakable, blinking from the attic window across the street. It wasn't the first time. For weeks, I'd noticed her silhouette behind the glass, always at the same hour, always in the same place, her phone or camcorder aimed directly at my garden. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Then I spotted the lens glint in the sunlight. Then I found the drone hovering just above my hydrangeas, its tiny camera tilting down toward my patio where I was drinking tea. That's when I knew. This wasn't paranoia. This was surveillance. And it wasn't just me she was recording. She had videos, hundreds of them, labeled, timestamped, archived. Of everyone. Neighbors arguing. Children playing. A man kissing someone who wasn't his wife. And worse. She filmed us all from her fortress of curtains and shadows. But I was the one she fixated on. Until I turned her obsession into her downfall. Because if you point a camera at me long enough, eventually, it will turn right back on you. And when the town saw what she was really hiding, not just in her attic, but in her smug little heart, the whispers turned into outrage. She thought she could control the narrative. What she didn't expect was that I'd take the footage she used to shame me and make it the reason she could never walk down our street again. My name is Lorna Whitfield, and I am 54 years old. I moved into my cozy white bungalow 3 years ago, thinking I had found the perfect retirement retreat. I tended to my roses, baked for my neighbors, and minded my own business. But across the street lived a woman named Marla Givens, sharp-faced, always watching, always smirking from behind half-closed blinds. At first, I thought she was simply nosy. Then came the drone, the blinking red lights, and the undeniable feeling that someone was tracking my every move. Eventually, I discovered she wasn't just filming me, she was building an archive of our entire neighborhood, manipulating what she saw, and using those clips to twist reputations. The moment I saw what she truly had on her computer, I knew I couldn't let her keep getting away with it. She wanted control. I gave her exposure. And the whole town watched. When I bought the little white house on Wrenwood Lane, I thought I was finally stepping into peace. After decades working as a hospice nurse and caring for my late husband through his cancer, I craved quiet. My daughter, Anne, had begged me to move closer to her in the city, but I wasn't ready for honking horns and downtown chaos. Wrenwood was perfect, tucked away, tree-lined, slow-moving. The kind of neighborhood where people waved from porches and left zucchini on doorsteps in the summer. The first few months were lovely. I settled into a rhythm, morning walks, midday gardening, a cup of tea by the bay window every afternoon. My closest neighbor was a retired schoolteacher named Edna, who had a parrot that swore under its breath and a laugh that could rattle the fence posts. On the other side was a young couple with twin toddlers who shrieked with joy every time I brought over cookies. It wasn't bustling, but it was safe. Friendly. Except for Marla. Marla lived in the 2-story Victorian across the street, the only house with blackout curtains drawn all day long. From the beginning, she seemed to observe more than she lived. While the rest of us chatted about garden mulch or the latest city ordinance, Marla stayed quiet, except when someone's lawn grew a little too long, or a package sat on a doorstep for more than a day. Then she'd emerge with pursed lips and a thinly veiled complaint. She never introduced herself. The first time I spoke to her was during my second week, when I waved from my driveway and she didn't wave back. I thought she hadn't seen me. The second time, I called out good morning. She glanced up, didn't reply, and let the curtain fall across her face like a stage ending a scene. I learned quickly that Marla had a reputation. She's vigilant, Edna told me one day with a grimace. Loves her cameras. Thinks she's the neighborhood watch, except no one asked her to be. Still, I tried to stay open-minded. Some people just prefer privacy. I reasoned. After years of handling grief and loss, I knew that quiet didn't always mean cruel. And I had no intention of making enemies. But strange things started happening. A week after I hosted a tiny tea for Edna and the twins' mom, I received an anonymous city complaint about unpermitted gatherings. Then came a warning about trash bins visible from the curb. I'd left mine out an hour past collection time. Small, petty things. Easily dismissed. Except they happened every time I so much as enjoyed myself. Once, after a late spring rain, I danced barefoot on my lawn like I used to when Anne was a girl. Just 5 minutes of freedom. The next morning, a typed note appeared in my mailbox. Public indecency is still illegal. Be advised. No signature. No return address. I started to feel watched. I noticed it first when I was clipping the hedges, the way the curtain on Marla's second-floor window would shift ever so slightly. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that I was letting one cold neighbor sour my days. But then I saw the drone. It buzzed like a mechanical wasp, hovering just above my roofline as I trimmed rose bushes near the fence. I waved it off, annoyed. But 2 days later, it returned lower this time, angling down toward my backyard, where I was lounging with a book and a lemonade. I stood up, stared directly at it, and it zipped upward and out of sight. I mentioned it to Edna the next day. Her face tightened. She's been at it for months, she muttered. Started with motion sensors, then the cameras, now the drone. I swear she's building a dossier on the entire street. But why? Edna shrugged. Power, maybe. Boredom. Or she thinks she's helping somehow. No one's really confronted her. Most folks just avoid her. I wanted to believe it was harmless. That Marla was just odd. But then came the day I saw the footage and realized just how dangerous she truly was. It happened by accident. I was returning Edna's mail. A delivery had landed at my door by mistake, and as I crossed her yard, I saw Marla's front door wide open. Unusual. Her drone sat idle on the porch table, humming quietly. Curiosity pulled me forward. I wasn't planning anything, just concerned she might have fallen or needed help. But as I approached the threshold, I heard voices not speaking, but playing. A video on loop. I glanced inside and saw a screen filled with thumbnails, video clips, each labeled, each with names. Edna, trash can left open. Lorna, talking to unknown vehicle. Twins' mother screamed at child, audio only. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. And each file was meticulously organized, dated, time-stamped. Some had notes. Some had been clearly edited. The one labeled Lorna Dances on Lawn had a subtitle, Possible Intoxication. I felt ill. This wasn't harmless surveillance. This was targeted manipulation. A weaponization of normal life. My hands trembled. I backed away quietly and returned home. But something in me had shifted. I knew now that Marla wasn't just watching. She was collecting, distorting, and waiting for the moment she could wield her footage like a sword. I wasn't going to let her. Not anymore. It was a Tuesday morning when the final straw snapped. I had just stepped out into the front yard with a basket of cut lavender, heading toward the mailbox, when I noticed a group of people gathered across the street. They were huddled near Marla's driveway, murmuring among themselves. Some of the neighbors I recognized. Others were from the far end of the street, faces I hadn't seen up close since the neighborhood block party last fall. And at the center of them all was Marla, standing on her porch, remote in hand, pointing toward a small portable projector aimed at her garage door. I blinked, confused. The garage door had become a screen, lit up by pixelated footage. I stepped closer, lavender forgotten in my hand. The footage was of me. There I was on my lawn, barefoot in the rain. There I was kneeling in the garden, my sundress hitched up to avoid the soil. And then, worse, there I was bending over, adjusting the hem of my shirt. The camera zoomed in uncomfortably close from what had to be her second-floor window. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few people turned to look at me. One woman whispered something behind her hand. "She's been filming me," Marla declared, her voice oddly calm and righteous. "Loitering near my property. Attempting to damage my plants. Behaving strangely, erratically. I've collected this footage as a precaution. For my safety." A few heads nodded. But others, Edna included, looked stricken. I couldn't breathe. The footage was warped, cut together in a way that implied intent. Me brushing aside a vine now looked like I was yanking at her rose bush. My dancing was slowed, replayed twice, as if it were some kind of display. The bending, God, the bending, made it seem vulgar, lewd. I stepped forward, trying to speak, but my voice caught. "This is a warning," Marla continued, turning toward me, gaze icy and full of satisfaction. "I will not tolerate harassment on my property. If I see you near my fence again, I will pursue legal action." There was a silence so sharp I could hear a dog barking 3 houses away. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My hands were shaking. I walked back across the street, slowly, the weight of every stair pressing into my back like iron. At my porch, I turned to look once more. Marla was already turning off the projector. Some neighbors lingered, others began drifting away, their expressions a mix of confusion and unease. Inside, I collapsed into the chair by the window, the basket of lavender spilling across the floor. She had filmed me, edited me, publicly shamed me, not for anything real, but for the audacity of simply existing in my own yard. She had twisted my movements, stripped away context, and wielded the images like evidence. It wasn't just about me. Marla had found power in her footage. Power to rewrite stories, to plant doubts, to pit neighbor against neighbor. If she had done this to me, she had likely done it to others. Perhaps not as publicly, but still with intent. I cried. Not out of humiliation, that came later, but from anger. From violation. From the sheer, cold injustice of it. The next day, Edna came by with a small pie and a longer apology. "I should have said something sooner," she murmured. "I've seen what she does. Heard the drone. I just thought, maybe if we ignored her, she'd stop." But she hadn't. And she wouldn't. I didn't want to be the victim in a cautionary tale. I had spent my whole life advocating for the vulnerable, for those who had no voice left. I couldn't let someone like Marla dictate who I was or how others saw me. She wanted to use footage against me? Then I'd show her and everyone else exactly what that footage really was. But on my terms. Revenge had never been in my nature. But truth? Justice? Those were things I understood deeply. And I had a plan. One that would require patience, precision, and most of all, the very tools Marla thought only she controlled. Because if she wanted to weaponize watching, then I would make sure the entire town watched her. And they would see everything. I began with what I knew, Marla's habits, her blind spots, and, most importantly, her camera angles. From the reflection on her upstairs window and the glint of her drone, I could identify at least 3 places she mounted her surveillance, 2 upper windows and a small birdhouse on her back fence that I now realized wasn't decorative at all. That week, I ordered a simple motion-activated trail camera from a wildlife site. Nothing suspicious, nothing illegal. I mounted it discreetly beneath the eave of my front porch, angled not at Marla's house, but at my own property. My goal was not to catch her filming me, I knew she did, but to document her methods. Her voice shouting across the lawn. Her drone hovering at dusk. Her sneaky walk down the side of my house under the guise of inspecting her hose line. I also began collecting testimonies. Quietly. Respectfully. I stopped by neighbors' homes with a calm demeanor and a simple question. "Has Marla ever recorded you?" Some were hesitant. Some laughed uncomfortably. But the more I asked, the more cracks appeared. One young couple said their kids stopped playing in the backyard because they kept spotting the drone. Another woman confessed that Marla had accused her of tampering with her sprinklers and threatened to file a police report. One man said she had once shouted through his fence about the smell of his barbecue, claiming she had evidence of smoke trespassing onto her side. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Marla was not a victim. She was a collector of misdeeds, real or imagined, and she wielded her footage not to protect, but to control. So, I went a step further. I created a secure folder on my computer labeled Footage Archive. Every video clip I took, every photo, Every dated entry from neighbors, I logged it all. Some were mundane, her standing on her porch at 6 a.m. filming the street. Others were striking, the drone lingering behind the McAllister's chimney, or the zoomed-in shots from her bedroom window clearly focused on my patio. But it was not yet enough to act. I needed her to go further, to push herself beyond the realm of plausible deniability. And she did right on schedule. It happened one windy Saturday morning. I was planting hyacinths in the side yard when I heard the unmistakable whirring of her drone. I did not flinch. I had learned not to give her a reaction. Instead, I turned slightly toward my camera, now mounted above my shed, and held up a peace sign, smiling softly. The drone bobbed in place, then turned and zipped back toward her yard like a retreating hornet. I figured that would be it for the day. But 2 hours later, a black and white patrol car pulled up outside my house. My stomach twisted, but I walked to the front porch calmly. The officer was polite, but firm. "We received a report of threatening behavior," he said. "The woman across the street says you made an obscene gesture toward her surveillance drone and have been deliberately antagonizing her." I blinked. "Obscene?" He nodded. "She claims you used a slashing motion across your neck and were making threatening signs in her direction." I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Officer," I smiled and gave a peace sign. "I have it on camera if you'd like to see." The moment I said that, his tone changed. "May I?" I led him inside, pulled up the footage, and we watched frame by frame as I offered the gentlest, most benign smile you could imagine. Peace sign. Brief wave. End of interaction. He exhaled and shook his head. "She's called us 3 times this month," he muttered. "And it's always vague. But this is something else." He left with a copy of the footage and promised to include it in the incident report. It was a small win, but an important one. Marla had finally crossed a line that involved formal records. She had tried to weaponize law enforcement in the same way she weaponized her footage, and now there was documented proof that her claims were false. But still, I didn't retaliate. Not yet. I waited and watched. And then came the final piece of her unraveling. It began with a scream. Not from me, but from a teenager down the street. One of the Ferguson's kids, a shy boy named Ben who skateboarded alone most afternoons. I heard him shout from 2 houses over, his voice cracking with fear. Then came the banging. His mother's voice, urgent. The sound of feet running. By the time I reached my porch, I saw Marla standing on her lawn, red-faced and furious, clutching her phone. The drone hovered above the street, its tiny propellers whirring. The Fergusons were gathered on their steps, trying to comfort Ben, who was sobbing and holding his arm. He had fallen badly, trying to duck away from the drone, which had swooped too low while he was skating down the sidewalk. There was a gash on his elbow and tears in his eyes. His mother was trembling with rage. "I told you to stop," she shouted at Marla. "He's a child." Marla's voice rose to a shriek. "He was coming too close to my driveway. That board could scratch my car. It's a public sidewalk. Not when it borders my property line." More neighbors emerged. Someone was already on the phone with the police. Another was filming the argument. Marla tried to summon dignity, but her voice cracked. "I have footage," she snapped. "Proof he was endangering my property." The words rang out with finality. And in that moment, something shifted. Because this time, she had not filmed a harmless adult planting flowers. She had injured a child. The next day, the police returned, but not to me. They went directly to Marla's door. And they left with her drone. She stood at her porch as they drove away, her arms crossed, her jaw set. She had lost her tool of control. And I was just getting started. The silence on Marla's lawn after the police took her drone was unlike anything I had ever seen in the neighborhood. No more mechanical whirring above the hedges. No more shadow sweeping across my patio. No more stares from her bedroom window. She had not spoken to anyone in 2 days. But I had not forgotten. For weeks, no, months, she had spied, harassed, and intimidated from behind her lens, accusing others while hiding her own obsession. The boy's injury had exposed her behavior to the authorities, but I wanted the truth to reach those she had tormented for years, not just the ones she had caught on camera, but the ones who had always felt watched, judged, controlled. That Sunday, I knocked on the Fergusons' door. They let me in with tired smiles, their son resting on the couch with a bandage around his arm. I asked if they would allow me to use the footage I had collected from my own cameras and from conversations with other neighbors. They nodded without hesitation. This street was nice before she made it a circus, Ben's mother said. It took me a few days to finish what I started. Using basic editing tools, I compiled a short video, not mean-spirited, not slanderous, just facts. It began with the drone footage from my own security system, the peace sign I had made, followed by the arrival of the police. Then I showed clips from other neighbors, Marla pacing along fences, filming barbecues, recording a couple walking their dog at night. I blurred faces. I masked house numbers. I focused on her behavior, not mine. The final segment was her shouting at Ben, captured clearly on a neighbor's phone. Her voice, shrill and unrelenting. Her words, twisted to justify scaring a child for passing her sidewalk. At the end of the video, I inserted a single line of text on a black screen. This is not safety. This is surveillance. I uploaded the video to a private link, shared only with a small neighborhood group that had long since stopped engaging with Marla's constant complaints. I asked them to watch it. Nothing more. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, neighbors began replying, some thanking me, others sharing their own run-ins with Marla, stories I had not heard before. One said she had caught Marla filming through her back gate during a private birthday party. Another said Marla had threatened to call the city over their holiday lights being too reflective. For years, Marla had wielded her footage like a weapon, always in private, quiet threats, veiled complaints, reports filed with vague accusations. But now, for the first time, the lens was pointed back at her. And the image it revealed was not flattering. I never posted the video publicly. I did not need to. The neighbors talked. And talked. At the next HOA meeting, one she had chaired for over a year, the room was cold when she walked in. A few did not look up. One older man stood and read a statement about the use of unwarranted surveillance and deliberate intimidation of residents. Marla's face turned red, but she didn't interrupt. She knew. The whispers had reached her. When it came time to vote on committee leadership, Marla was quietly removed. She left the meeting early. A few weeks later, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. I never spoke to her again. But on her last morning in the neighborhood, I saw her standing in her driveway, arms crossed, watching the movers carry boxes down her steps. Her camera was gone. Her drone never reappeared. And the look in her eyes was not defiant. It was tired. Because control may bring power for a while, but when it isolates you, humiliates you, and turns your entire community against you, what are you really left with? She moved out. Someone else moved in. A young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever. They waved at me the first day. Set up a small wind chime by the porch and planted daisies along the fence. And no one filmed them. The quiet that followed Marla's departure felt unfamiliar at first. It wasn't just the absence of her drone or the way she used to hover behind curtains. It was the sense of peace that had finally returned to our street. I didn't realize how much I had been holding my breath until I no longer needed to. Life went on. Children played again in front yards without glancing nervously at the sky. Neighbors lingered on sidewalks during evening walks. Laughter returned to barbecues and backyard parties. Even the HOA meetings shifted, no longer about citations and complaints, but about gardens, shared tools, and new ideas for community events. We remembered what it was like to live near people, not under their watch. I did not become more social than before. I still enjoyed my solitude, my books, and my evenings spent pruning roses or walking by the lake. But I no longer felt like a character in someone else's paranoid script. I had taken control of my own narrative, not through anger, but through quiet, deliberate truth. The new neighbors, Sophie and Daniel, brought life with them. Their child toddled up our walkway one morning, handing me a dandelion with sticky fingers. I thanked her with a laugh and invited her parents for lemonade. They stayed and told me how much they loved the neighborhood already. I did not warn them about the past. It didn't seem necessary. Some things are better left buried beneath fresh soil and new roots. What stayed with me most, though, was not Marla's departure, or even the subtle vindication I felt when the neighborhood turned. It was the realization that sometimes the most powerful form of revenge is not rage or confrontation. It is exposure. Quiet, respectful, undeniable truth, the kind that turns every accusation back onto the person who made it. Marla thought her camera gave her power. But she forgot that every lens can be turned. Every watcher can be watched. And every lie, no matter how carefully framed, eventually reveals the hand that holds it. So I ask you, when someone invades your peace, poisons your reputation, or tries to control your world from the shadows, will you cower? Or will you find a way to hold up a mirror and let the truth speak louder than any camera ever could? Because the only footage that truly matters is the one that shows who we are when no one's supposed to be watching.